Welcome back to the Real Life Momz Podcast. This is a place where you get to take a break from all your to-dos and take time to focus on you. I'm Lisa Foster, your host, and today I'm excited to be joined by Jennifer Schwytzer. She is a fellow mom, a life coach, and a social worker. And together we're going to explore how to overcome people-pleasing and the importance of setting boundaries. So welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited to have you because we all have a little people pleasers inside of us, even if we don't know it. I'm going to read a little snippet from your bio that I saw that I think people can relate to and really ties into our topic today. So you had wrote, if you look up the definition of people pleaser, you would find a picture of me up close and personal. I was the one who said yes to everything and never stuck to the boundaries I set. Like, totally relatable. I mean, we set those boundaries and what happened? So I'd love to hear more about your story about being a people pleaser and just what was the moment that actually changed you to say, okay, we got to do something different here.
Yeah. And honestly, I think we're totally in this place where we never know we're a people pleaser until we're like way down that rabbit hole of, oh my gosh, I've kind of lost sight of what I'm actually wanting to do and what I actually want to spend my time on. And it is so easy to people please and not even know you're doing it. For me, the biggest thing was not really being very clear on what my boundaries actually were. And so I love that we're talking about both boundaries and people pleasing because I really think they go together. And to be aware and know what your boundaries are, you're much more able to start saying no to things. You're much more able to recognize, where do I want to be spending my time? What do I want to be doing? And as moms, we don't have the extra time to just give. And so recognizing, like, where are my boundaries? What are they? And how do I just stop saying yes to everything to make someone else happy? Am I saying yes to this because it's what I want to do, or it's because it's what I think somebody else wants me to do?
Oh, yeah. Such a good point. And half the time, I don't think we even know the answer to that.
Right.
So I guess that is my first question is, how do you know what to say yes to, what to say no to?
So I like to start when I work with folks, I really like to start working on what are our values, what is important to us, and what are our priorities. And I work with a lot of people who have a career, have a family, have friends. And so it's like, what in there is most important to you? Let's really kind of weed through and pull out, like, what are your priorities? And we'll sometimes go through this for a couple of weeks until we're really, really clear on what is it that's important to you and where do you want to be spending your time. Because once we have that kind of core foundation of what's important to us, what our priorities are, that's where we get to make the next decisions. That's where we get to start setting the boundaries. That's where we get to start asking ourselves, does this fit into what I'm looking for? Does this fit into the foundation that I'm looking to build for myself? And so really recognizing, what is it that you want to see for your life, your family? What is it that's important, and how do we get ourselves there?
And it's funny because as you're saying it, like I've done this work, so I get it. But
Yeah.
however, as you're saying it, like that question would break me out into like a panic attack, to be honest, like what's
Yeah.
important to me, because
Yeah.
it's very intertwined with
Yep.
not just what's important to me, but who am I as a mom? How does it
Yep.
affect everybody
Yep.
else? And how do we work past some of those
Yeah.
like
And
barriers?
I think you're right, because for a lot of people it is terrifying. And I've had people come to sessions and they're like, I can't do this. It's too much. And so some people just might not be at that place, but I do think for those people that might struggle a little bit more, you might need help in getting there. So if you're working with a coach, a therapist, if you're working with a family member, a friend, like, open up those conversations and really dig into, what am I missing? And a lot of people that I work with, they'll struggle with, I take the stress from work home, and that takes away from my time with my family or my kids. Or and so we kind of weed through that. What's important about that time with your kids? So a lot of times it's getting to that kind of root and asking questions. And sometimes, honestly, we're not ready to ask ourselves those
Mm.
questions. So it has to feel like a very safe environment to do that. And even if you just think, what's one thing that I want to do a little bit differently? And how do I put some value on that? So if you're looking for one place to start, maybe it's just asking yourself that question.
And that's makes it like easier, just
Yeah,
not trying to say I have to do all the things that are important
right,
to me. And I
right.
also think those things can change, right? Because
Yeah,
we evolve, even as our kids get older, we're changing
yeah.
too, and our interests are changing. So I feel like we need to like revamp our list every every
We
quarter.
do. We definitely do. It's definitely like something that you should kind of be going back to and being like, does this still apply? But, another thing that you just mentioned, that these lists could be so big. And the
Mm.
the idea of like maybe that looks like just writing down a bunch of ideas, but what you can do is start to pair those together. And so you're going to see some common themes come up, and that's what you're going to focus on. So somebody might say like, oh, well, I want to focus on my nutrition and I want to walk every day. And so, okay, that's like healthy lifestyle management. So something that you value is that feeling of being healthy. So a lot of times we can kind of group them together so it's not so overwhelming, and we like go down to like 2 or 3 at the most.
And I think that's a good point, having a little bit less, just
Yeah.
those 2 or 3, because you are talking about almost like your core values, right? So
Yeah.
what is the core value is like, yes, I want to take a walk every day, but is the core value is that I really need to balance my nervous system or something like that. Like what
Right.
is the core
Right. Right.
piece? And that sounds like, yeah, it takes a lot of unfolding. Do
Yes.
you, I know you work with a lot of clients too, so do you give them specific exercises to do to get to that list?
Yeah, and oftentimes I'll do exercises that we go like 5 questions deep. And so we'll start
Mm.
moving down these questions, and then we'll bring them together and say, okay, let's work through them together. So I agree that it can be overwhelming if you're just already overwhelmed with life and work and in your home life, and somebody says, what's important to you? You're like, I don't even know. I'm not sure. And so recognizing that maybe that's your point, like, okay, I need to slow down and maybe really think about how I can start to weed through just putting something on my agenda that goes in the direction of what's important to me and my values, and to getting to that place.
So we worked on what's important to us. Hopefully, we have one or
Yep.
two things that are
Yep.
important to us. Then what's the next step?
Yeah. So then we start making decisions. And this is, people have so much resistance with this. We start making decisions based on that. So when somebody asks us, hey, can you do this, this, and this? And you have to pause for that moment and think back to, okay, does that align with the things that I'm looking to bring into my life right now? And if the answer is no, there's kind of your tangible evidence for, so to speak, that it's okay to say no to that. Maybe family time is something that is on your priority list, and somebody's asked you, "Hey, we have this volunteer event after work and I really need bodies and we would really love to have you. Your daughter has a soccer game." That people pleaser would say, "Oh, absolutely. I'll be there. What time do you need me? What do I need to bring?" And the person who's looking at their priorities will say, "I'm so sorry, but my schedule is already booked tonight."
Mm.
And so
Mhm.
you're taking those decisions and you're basing that on what's important to me and what am I saying yes to? Really, really considering, where those yeses are going for you.
I feel like as I got older, I felt less like I needed to say yes. Because I remember back in the day that I would say
Yep.
yes to something, and the rest of the time I was just trying to figure out how to get out of it.
Right.
And
Right. Well, and I think it creates so much anxiety for us because it's
mm,
like, how am I in 2 different places? I don't really want to do this. Am I going to do good work? Am I going to really feel present? Well, now I'm missing that. Like, your wheels are spinning, and that anxiety is not good for us.
no, no, we have enough to stuff to deal with. We don't need to deal with
Exactly.
how to get
Exactly.
out of something we said yes to, right?
Right. Right.
Okay, but it's still difficult, right, to say no. There are certain
Yeah.
things. Okay, here's
Yeah.
the gray area, right? There are
Yep.
certain things I can see, like no, that doesn't align with me.
Yep.
Really, there's no hard feelings. Like, no,
Yep.
I don't want to volunteer. That's an
Yep.
easy one, right? Like,
Yep.
but then
Yep.
there are things that we all have, right?
Yep.
That are kind of a little bit have to,
Yep.
right? That
Yep.
are required, but you really have no interest. What do you do
Yep.
with that gray area? Because there's a
Yeah.
big one.
So I'm going to tell you to start in those easier areas because it becomes a little bit easier over time. And like you said, the older we get, the easier it is. So if you're feeling like super uncomfortable, start in those spaces that it's like, okay, no one's going to get mad. No one's going to get hurt if I say no. So I'm going to start there and like test the waters a little bit. So start over there. And then, yes, there are those gray areas. And there are those very black and white areas where the expectation is there to say yes. And so what I'll do a lot of times with clients is really focus on, okay, how do we get our priority in? How do we get what's important to us in a different time during the day? So we're not saying, this is off of our plate or gone. We're getting it in, we're nourishing ourselves in a different way, but still able to fulfill our requirements. So it's not like this or that. It's like, how can I do this and that? And so
Mhm.
sometimes it's just about kind of thinking, okay, if I do this, how can I kind of rearrange things so that I make sure I get things in for myself today or do what's on my own to-do list? And sometimes those yeses can be like, yes, I can help you, but I have 4 other things on my plate before that happens, before I can get to that. So never putting aside what it is you have planned for yourself to get through that day, and just kind of, how can I do this and that? Not an if or not a this or that. How can I do this and that?
I
And
like that. I like that a
yeah,
lot because a lot of times I think we drop our thing to
yes,
then do the other thing that we didn't really want to
yes,
do. So
yeah,
I like the fact that if you have stuff on your to-do list already for you, that you're not just going to knock that out. You can
right,
say,
right,
okay, I can help you with this, but not until this time or after dinner
right,
or
right.
whatever,
And
or I'm
so,
not
yeah.
free tonight. Yeah, maybe tomorrow.
Exactly. And setting some expectations around that you don't just drop everything. Like if it's a work request or if it's, something that comes in from your partner or whatever that looks like, you're not just, I'm happy to help you with that, or I'm happy to take that off your plate. These are just some things that I have to get done first. And so just recognizing some flexibility is okay. And I think people get stuck when they try and set boundaries. It's either very firm or it doesn't happen. And so
Mhm.
we do have to have flexibility because things change every single day and different requests are going to come in and we have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, let's talk about that flexibility of
Yeah.
boundaries, because that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
Because you think of boundaries that if you do something and someone steps over the line once, then they can always step over the line, right?
Yep.
So, but what you're saying is like you can be flexible but still have a boundary. So,
Yeah.
yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. And I think that we can take the workplace, for example, and if people are going to test your boundaries. People are
Mhm.
going to test what you're going to be able to stick to and what you're not. And so it's our job to kind of, continue to remind them of our boundaries, but it's also our job to be flexible in that if somebody asks us, like, we're still a team player, we still want to be seen as like, oh, don't go ask Jen because she's definitely not going to help you. You don't want to be seen like that in the
Right.
workplace. So when you have the flexibility, it's like, actually, my schedule just cleared up for the afternoon. I'm happy to help with someone else's project, or I'm happy to send out an email that says I'm available to assist anybody who might need help. And so the idea that we're not saying we're not team players, and this goes for home, for work, we have to recognize people are going to test our boundaries. That's okay. And it's okay to continue to tell them our boundaries. It's okay to continue to talk about our boundaries, but it's also okay to be flexible in that you're still that team player that wants to be able to help and provide support for the rest of your team or family.
And I think as people start to learn what it is that's important to you, right, that you're saying yes to,
Yeah.
I think naturally those are the things that people start to ask you to do.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
So, kind of bouncing back to a little bit of the people pleaser, where do you think that actually stems from? Because there's a deeper core
Yeah.
issue here than just like
Yeah.
I want to help everybody, right? Like
Yeah. Yep. Well, I can say, I can speak for myself personally. I've always struggled with anxiety and my brain is always on. And I think that a lot of women, especially, the numbers are really high for women who struggle with anxiety and the thinking that we need to take care of everything. We need to make sure everything's completed, done, perfection. I just got off a call earlier with a woman who just talked about her need for perfection. And if we're not perfect, what happens? Are we replaceable? Are we, and so those thoughts can just kind of just continue to go and circle in your mind. And so for me, a lot of my people pleasing came from that underlying anxiety of, am I doing a good enough job? And, being in a workforce that I primarily worked in a hospital setting. And I remember when I graduated from social work, I'm in my mid 20s and I'm working with doctors who have been doctors for 60 years and nurses who are very seasoned. And I'm like, how do I belong here? And you get those thoughts. And I think as a parent too, we are currently fostering 2 9-month-old babies, and they came home from the hospital. My anxiety went wild because I thought, what do I know about babies? What do I know about keeping children alive and well? And that anxiety of the what ifs and your mind kind of taking control over some of those things, I think that really can impact your need to make everything on the outside look really good.
Yeah, that perfection. So I didn't realize like people pleasing and perfectionism are kind of intertwined, but it sounds like they are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that there's definitely a connection between them because when you are people pleasing, you're like, you're wanting everybody to think that I'm that person that's always going to say yes or always going to help or always going to be there. And there's that perfectionism piece that's like, well, if I'm there, it's always done and it's always done well and I'm always available. So I definitely think there's a connection.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting that when you give the example of you being like 20 and in the hospital, because I was PT 20s, right?
Yep.
And in the
Yep.
hospital and
Yep.
exactly like I'm supposed to like get everyone better, like
Right.
that was the expectation. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
lot of pressure
Yeah.
of, for anyone.
Yep.
And I think it's interesting because I do think that's a very moldable time for us because you're out of the care of your family and you're
Yeah.
now starting to like venture and be independent and have a
Yep.
job. And it is a lot of pressure that you feel like you have to live up to these standards. And it's funny
Yeah.
because after, I don't know how long you've been out in your field,
Yeah.
but I mean, after like, 20 some odd years, you're kind of like, no, like nobody knows what they're doing out there. Like everyone's
Right.
just walking around confidently,
Right.
not knowing what they're doing, and they're doing a great job.
Yeah. I actually, in the hospital, I was surrounded, I felt like by people who just knew what they were doing, always on, like super confident. And I remember I transitioned out of the hospital into coaching about three and a half years ago. One of my first clients was one of the nurses I worked with
Wow.
and had
Crazy.
such like imposter syndrome of like, I'm never good enough.
Mhm.
I'm not good enough. And I'm like, my mind was blown. And I was like, oh, okay. Like
Yeah.
so many things started like falling into place after that moment. But what people are showing on the outside is not always what's going on the inside.
And that's why I think these conversations are so important for people to hear
Yeah.
because exactly, I would be told that like you look calm on the outside. You're so calm. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that's lovely. But inside, it's like a 3-ring circus that I'm like
Right.
freaking out about having panic attacks. Like, I'm glad I look like really easy and calm right now.
I
It's not
know.
how I feel at all. And I
I
don't think it
know.
was how I was trying to even present.
No, no. And we want to also look like we have something together, and
Exactly. Especially in the healthcare field. You definitely want to feel together.
Yes. And something that like still baffles me is I'm in a field now where it's okay to say like, I don't know the answer to that. Like, that's a
Yes.
really great question.
Yes.
And when I was in that corporate hospital setting, I don't think that that was an okay answer. My thought process was, well, I need to have the answers. Like, if I
Mhm.
don't, who doesn't? But that is not the case. But that's like the perception that we have, that we have to know what we're doing. We have to be on all the time. And that's ingrained in us. And I've been in the social work field for almost 20 years, and it's starting to change. It's starting to be in a place where, and I think schools are starting to do this too, like pay more attention to wellness and,
Mhm.
taking care of their employees and the importance of that, because it never was there before.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree. When I learned the words "I don't know" to say out loud, my life
Right.
changed. I like
Yeah.
it was like a weight was lifted off of me, and I
Yeah.
say it to my clients, I say it to my family and my kids. I say it
Yeah.
as much as possible whenever I don't know, because
Yeah.
there is a lot of pressure to have to know everything. And it's
Yeah.
so funny because the response that you get, even from patients that I treat, I'll just say, I don't know, but we can work with this. Like,
Yeah.
I'm happy, like,
Yeah.
we can figure things out together.
Right.
But they are relieved to
Yeah.
know that someone is honest, telling
Yes.
them just like it is, and that they don't have to know all the answers either.
Right. Right. And that people pleasing brain of mine, like I'll catch it sometimes because I'll try and be like, oh, well, maybe, and maybe. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, stop. Actually, I have no idea. Like, let's figure this out together. But
Right.
that people pleasing brain of mine tries to seep through sometimes, and I have to catch it because I always want to have the answer, and I want to be available, and I want to fix something. And I can't do that all the time, and sometimes I forget that.
Yeah, yeah. So when those little moments come where you need to remind yourself, are there
Yeah.
things that like kind of you ask yourself, or,
Yeah.
some words that maybe you can
Yeah.
share?
One thing that has really helped me is just to slow down and like
Mm.
take a deep breath and, okay, let me have you ask me that question again. And so then it gives my brain a chance to really kind of process again. I'm definitely a processor. So I have to catch myself, slow down, take that deep breath though, to really like make sure that I'm not just spewing out an answer just to
Right.
provide an answer. And so for me, it's really my connection with the people that I work with is the most important thing to me. And so I'll say, okay, let me just slow down for a minute. Why don't you ask me that question again, or let me ask it to you and make sure I'm understanding you correctly so that I can just slow down, take a step back and kind of regroup myself.
I love that because I think we always feel like we have to like say an answer quickly
Yes.
or fill space. I'm here to
Yes.
say there is nothing wrong with silence, and everyone wants to fill it. But like
Yeah.
you can pause for
Yeah.
anything we're doing, right? To
Yeah.
really think about, do I really want to do that or not? Do,
Yeah.
how do I want to react or not? Like,
Right.
and
Right.
and that sometimes really does bring a lot more clarity to whatever
Yeah.
situation you're in. So yeah, I
Yeah.
I love that.
And I love to use the example too. Like if somebody texts us, we have a moment to process that before we
Right.
respond. We
Yeah.
have a moment to take a look at our calendar and see, like, okay, if I say yes to this, what would I be saying no to? And
Mhm.
so you have that ability to slow down, ask yourself some of those questions. And when we're in person, we forget to give ourselves that opportunity. And I think that's a really important piece, is allow yourself that ability to be like, you know what, that's, a great question. Let's jot that one down. Let me see if I can figure that out. I'm not sure. Or if it's a request, like, oh, let me just check my schedule before I give you a response, or, whatever that is, just allow yourself a moment to just kind of take it in, process it, and figure out if that's doable for you.
I love that. And I think we all need to like write down some of those sentences you just said, right? To have them handy, because like a lot of
Yeah.
times we are in the moment, and as much as we want to slow down,
Yes.
we
Yes.
don't have like something on hand to
Yeah.
say, "Oh, let me get back to you." Like, which is
Yeah.
so easy. Let me
Yeah.
get back to you. Let me
Right.
think about that. Let me
Yeah.
figure it out. Like,
Let me check my schedule.
yeah, that's
Absolutely. Like
so
anything,
easy.
anything that's going to buy you time is okay.
Exactly. But what comes to your mind? Like, yeah, sure, that's fine. That's the
Exactly. That
one
is
that we're programmed to change, to say.
it comes out immediately and then you're like, "Oh no, no."
So I think that's a great option, is to have some of these other sentences
Yep.
just in the back of our head. So
Yep.
when something comes up, we can access them really quickly to give us that space to then make a better
Yeah.
decision for us.
Absolutely.
Okay. So is there like 3 things that you want moms to really just start doing to help create these boundaries? Like, what would those 3 things be?
Recognizing it's okay to say yes to yourself because we are always last on the list and we always prioritize everyone else over ourselves. So, recognizing you can't set boundaries without taking care of ourselves, I think is the number one piece. So,
Mhm.
saying yes to yourself is so, so important. 2, take a moment for yourself during the day. If that's just a walk outside around the garden, making lunch for yourself rather than the whole entire family, stepping away from your computer to drink your coffee or fill your water bottle or whatever you need to do, take a moment during the day just for you. So you can have that ability to respond with, give me a minute, let me check my schedule, because we have to be in a good mental place in order to do that.
Mm.
And then 3, it's just recognizing that if you want to start prioritizing those values, that those, what's important to you, you can. You can absolutely do that. There is time. We all say there's never enough time. There is. When it is important to us, we can make time for it. We can make it happen. Things just have to look a little bit different.
Yes, for sure. I mean, how many times do you not have time? And all of a sudden your kid says, I need this, and you do it, right?
You
All of
have
a sudden that
time.
time appears,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
yes, I agree. And I think there's secret time that I like, that I personally use a lot. Like, if I have to pick up my kid, I get there half an hour early so I can do
Yes.
something for myself in the car. And usually it's like a meditation, listen to a book, read, whatever it is in the
Absolutely.
car. I also leave work. Okay. I know everyone's listening to the podcast. So the word is out, people, but I leave work 30 minutes later, then I'm done, because if it's a night I don't have to pick up my kids
Yep.
from school, I know that I can have some downtime,
Yep.
get myself together,
Yep.
do something for myself, even in that 30 minutes, and then come
Absolutely.
home. So yes, that's a
Yeah.
little secret between us moms, hopefully, and my family doesn't listen to this podcast.
Secret safe with me.
That's okay, right? I'm doing boundaries. That's it. That's what I do. It's all
Exactly.
out.
That's a boundary. But that's you being able to recognize the importance of taking care of you.
Right. Because then when I do come home and see my family, I can be on. If I had rushed
Exactly.
right from work and then got in and
Yep.
had dinner and
You
did all the
show up
things,
differently.
I don't want to listen to everybody's stuff. I don't want to do all the
Yeah.
things, but I show up ready because I've taken
Yeah.
a little time for myself, even if
Yep.
it's just a few minutes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Agreed. I love the idea of the getting to the daycare a little bit early or school a little bit early. My kids don't talk yet. So sometimes I'll just put them in the car because they're great in the car. We'll drive to daycare and I'll have 15 extra minutes in the car before I bring them in, because then
Nice.
they're quiet, they're great. And, but I have 15 minutes just to like check my emails real quick or listen to that podcast that I've been putting off. And I love it. Like, I'll just sit in the parking lot and just have those 15 minutes. The kids are in the car. We're all good.
Yes. I mean, there's so many ways, so many creative
Yeah.
ways. Okay. So where can the listeners find you, and tell us like what you have to offer people?
Yeah. So you can find me at kindfulnesscoaching.com. And I have a guide for foster parents. And the guide is self-care for foster parents, making time in your day to take care of yourself. Could be used for any mama, though.
Perfect. I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on and telling us a little bit about people pleasing and making boundaries. This was like just so much fun.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode. It was so much fun to talk to Jennifer and learn more about setting boundaries and finding out what's important to us so we know what to say yes or no to. To learn more about Jennifer and what she offers, just click on the link in the show notes. And remember, until next week, keep taking time for yourself because you matter.